Welcome to the Let's Talk Paralegal podcast, where the legal industry gets real. I'm your host, Etta Rosa, legal consultant, speaker, and founder of Etta Rosa LLC and the Limitless Paralegal Academy. This isn't your stuffy legal studies school lecture. We're talking mindset, money, modern workflows, and how to build a career and a life you don't need a vacation from. Let's cut the fluff, raise the bar, and change the game one conversation at a time. If you like what you hear, feel free to share and send us your feedback. Now let's talk paralegal. Hey guys, welcome back to the Let's Talk Paralegal podcast, another bonus episode for you. Okay, so today we're having a conversation that honestly every single person in the legal industry needs to be part of, and that's AI. And look, I know we've all heard the buzzword a million times, AI this, AI that, but today we're cutting through all the noise and getting real about what artificial intelligence actually means for us, for paralegals, for law firms, for the way we work every single day. Because the truth is, it's already changing things, whether we're ready or not. My guest today is one of the sharpest legal minds at the intersection of law and technology, and he's going to help us make sense of all of it. This one is going to be good. Listen in for more. Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Let's Talk Paralegal podcast. Today, I have an amazing host, and we're going to talk about one thing that probably isn't going to surprise anyone at this point because we need to start talking about it more, which is artificial intelligence, technology, and how it's implemented, how it's a plug and play or not, depending on where you're at, with the legal professionals, right? It can be used as a tool. You know, for me, it's always like a fight, like a tug of war. Like, I like it, I don't like it. Like today, we were both having technical difficulties. So sometimes we're mad at it, but we're going to see how this all ties into our legal profession, our daily, career life, even personal life at this point, because technology is our heartbeat and it's how we're able to run the podcast, meet other people, do conferences around the world. And so, again, it's a love-hate relationship, but we're going to talk about it. And so, Kirk, without further ado, give us a little background, your little origin story first, and then we can jump right in.
Sure. Yep. So the background is I'm an attorney. I've been a patent lawyer for about 10 plus years now. I mostly specialize in IP. That means for those of you who are not familiar with the industry that a lot of us had to do technology background stuff before we ended up going into the law. So my background is computer science and electrical engineering. I actually went back to school for that. Started off my career in Tokyo at a law firm over there. I spent some time with that firm before I ended up coming over to DC for a different firm. And now I've been founding my own firm where we're very technology focused, as well as just sort of using a lot of tools that we think are useful for ourselves. That means that I've been deep in the thick of it for a very long time in terms of what's useful versus what's not, what makes things efficient. And so generally speaking, I'm just someone who has very strong opinions on it across the board, right? I've been in a lot of groups trying to evaluate possible tools. I in many ways have disliked them just as much as I'm sure many people have who are listening to this. So I kind of understand it, but I'm also someone who used to be a programmer and things like that. So I understand it from a technical level as well as just a use level.
I love that. I love the combination and how we can transfer these skills into everything that we do in life, especially if they're like these core, most dominating skills, right? And a lot of people just look at skills as hard or soft, or now they're called human centric, like they have all these beautiful labels for it. But at the end of the day, if we can transfer them, they're worthy, right?
Right.
So let's get into the topic of the day, which is technology and how we can either do a plug and play, maybe do a trial run, maybe not so well, do a pros and cons list. Walk us through what that looks like for the average legal professional.
So really, it's almost overwhelming in some ways how much there is out there that you could possibly use. And the reality of it is, I'll be very blunt with you just to spoil my general perspective on it. A lot of it's not very useful, right? And in many cases, especially in the paralegal front, there's this pressure to constantly be seeking out new tools that are allegedly better. In my experience, the vast majority of them are not, right? They're the things that you can use that will improve your time. In some ways, you'll know it very quickly. And granted, there's some spin up time there, but the reality of it is, no matter what you're doing, no matter what field of law you're working in, there are some things that make your life a lot easier, right? The good example is there are plenty of plugins for, say, Microsoft Word that will, for example, check your grammar better, for example, or will help you file things better when if you're filing with a district court that allows you to do so electronically. There's a variety of ways in which you can do that that actually genuinely will help you. On the flip side, candidly, there's a lot of different vendors out there who are promising the moon and the stars, and when it comes to new AI technology, and I've vetted them. They're just simply not very good. I've developed these systems myself. I have some that I've developed for free, so they're online. You can use them yourself. They're in patent world, so unless you do it, I don't think they'd be very useful. But and nonetheless, the idea being that I know what these are developed like, and I'm going to tell you right now that the vast majority of them are overpromising. They are trying to convince you that, but for your use of their system, you could be faster, stronger, better, whatever. I'm gonna tell you right now. I'll give an example. Literally 10 minutes before this, I received a call from some new vendor trying to say that, well, we've automated client correspondence that way that you don't have to send them emails or whatever. That sounds great in theory. First of all, I don't think they've ever done that. I think they're just hoping that I'll agree with them and let them try to hire them and let them develop it on their own. The bigger issue is, candidly, we both know that that's a dangerous game, right? We would never trust an automated model to send off a letter to a client who might fire us if it goes wrong, right? At minimum, someone's got to be reviewing it. So, in many ways, you have to thread the needle of saying what's actually useful for me as a paralegal, as a legal professional in any case, and what is actually doing what they say they can do realistically, right? Or is it just a bunch of smoke?
Right. Yeah, I was having this conversation with one of my clients, which is also a transactional lawyer, corporate business, and his clients he's always looking for like not shortcuts, but just tools that will assist him so that when he gets a 77-page contract and he has to redline it, make his life a lot easier when he's delivering his red lines and things like that. So we were going through all these artificial intelligence, AI tools, and none really fit the bill for him, right? Because, 77 pages, first of all, that is a true story. I thought he was exaggerating. He actually showed me the contract. I'm like, first of all, this deal is not big enough for a 77-page contract. I'm like, you're not talking about like $1 trillion deal for this to be this intricate. I guess the other party did not agree with me. But anyways, so we went down the list. We actually used artificial intelligence to find artificial tools, which I thought was genius, right? But you're right. There aren't some that really truly fit what we're looking for, right? Because sometimes we're looking for something specific, which is what I'm calling the Amazon effect. Like I can no longer go to a store, any store, and find exactly what I'm looking for, right? So I go on Amazon or I go online and I look for this specific product that I'm looking for, or when I'm designing or redesigning our children's room and I have a chat GPT image because, I took the picture and it AI'd it and I'm like, yeah, I want that. Where can I get that? There's no longer a Pinterest board that's going to assist me because when I click on the suggestions, it's not going to help me. So, we use artificial intelligence day in and day out right now. It's literally implemented in our phones, in our computers, our TVs, our smartwatches, like everything that we touch nowadays, even within our softwares, case management software, it has some form of artificial intelligence. So I totally agree with you, and it's totally tracks with what we do with the consulting side. As far as there's a lot of tools out there, and they definitely overpromise. I get pitched. Well, I can actually run the numbers because we have a report that we pull with the analytics and everything. But I want to say on average, we get pitched 100 to 120 legal technology companies, artificial intelligence that just want us to, out of nowhere, just say, hey, by the way, we have this awesome tool for you for our clients because they see that we do what we do and, we're actually good at it. And I was like, yeah, but we're good at it for a reason, right? We're not just going to sell them products, one, that they don't need, two, that don't fit the bill, three, that I know doesn't work, and four, how do we, for example, if we're using a case management software that already has an AI tool, how are we supposed to be like, oh, by the way, you need another tool or you need another thing, and it's like you get to this overutilization of tools, and then where we get into this subscription mode where we're paying all this money that is not really the return on investment, right? So as business owners, as legal professionals working for a business, looking at their budgets and financing, billing our time, not billing our time, but still being conscious of our time, because I always like to tell my legal professionals, regardless if you're on a contingency or a billable hour, doesn't matter. You should be tracking your time and realizing the value that you're actually bringing to the firm, because it's reportable. It's great for interviews. It's great for promotion time. This is data that we need. We live off of data. And for a world that really should live off of data, we really don't. We don't have much of it, especially if we're in that still old school mentality of paper files, which I hate. I wish we could just burn it all down, but we can't. Unfortunately, there is some need for these little pesky things called originals. So, having said that, though, how do we vet these tools, right? Like, how do we know that this tool is either going to be useful or, like you were saying, overpromise, underdelivered, very costly? Maybe some people are on a budget, especially paralegals. They're always looking for the best, most efficient, effective tools. So, how do we go about that?
Sure. So one of the best ways to understand it is to start off with the basic principles. So just to kind of remind folks, AI is a very big umbrella that encompasses a lot of different things. So when people say it gets very annoying in some ways, because I recognize that when people say it could mean everything in the sun, the moon, stars, realistically, in the AI, in law front, it often means a few things, right? The vast majority of legal tools you're going to see are essentially wrappers for what are called LLMs, right? Large language models. That's your chat GPTs of the world. That's your Geminis of the world. In general, though, those are a subsidiary of a bigger topic, which could also be, for example, what we call NLP, natural language processing. So it's just saying using very vetted computer processes to understand words and how they relate to each other.
Hmm.
And the critical thing is NLP tools have been around for quite some time. One easy example is spell check on Microsoft Word is technically NLP. This stuff has been kicked around in any form since at least the 50s, if not the 60s. So in some ways, the new question is whether or not those LLM wrappers and those LLM systems are necessarily new, useful, whatever. And the way I like to think about it is there's two questions to ask yourself primarily, right? Before we even get into the question of cost or contracts or things like that. The first one is in general, is it solving a very discrete problem without the reliance on magic, right? So many tools out there are essentially prompting your chat GPTs, your Geminis, whatever, to perform tasks like write me, a patent application in our world. That's very dicey. That's very dangerous because remember, those tools are not, there's no intelligence there. There's no thought process. What those are typically doing is that they are essentially, I'm being very simplistic here. They're guessing next words, next pixels, whatever, in a very, very clever way. So it could be distinct. It could look a lot like it's being very intelligent, but remember, it's oftentimes modeling itself on what it's seen before. So on one hand, it's only as good as the data that's pulling from, which could be, bad contracts, bad patents, something terrible. On the other hand, it's just guessing. It does not fully understand. It's got context. It's got a lot of information that it can use to be very useful. But at the same time, it's not very good. So when at first glance, if someone's giving you some recommendation that basically boils down to, we found a very clever way to tell ChatGPT what to do for us, you should immediately be skeptical, notwithstanding that. And the next one is just, again, it's a gut check. Do you know this is going to fix a very discrete problem for you? There are many companies out there who are offering to fix problems that are, we'll say, quasi useful or at least quasi related to what you do. So, if there's a pain point for you right now and someone's offering to fix it, that's persuasive, right? If there's something that you find difficult to do, in some ways that could be, 77-page contract. But if they're coming to you and saying, we're going to automate some portion of this that is not the biggest part of your practice, then I would be skeptical anyway, because in one hand, you might be spending a lot of money for a very small fix to your process. On the other hand, if they're promising the moon and the stars on a very small part of that, that's a big offer for a very small benefit to you. So the rubric, the standard, the bar should go much higher for you, as opposed to say, perhaps aiding you in a way that doesn't get in your way. Well, maybe okay, sure, right? So it's really the questions, how much you really care, how much you're having a problem, et cetera.
No, and I love that. I love that. We have to look at the full spectrum. So I learned from one of my business coaches a long time ago, and she was very clear that you are going to get pitched a lot. Everybody's going to come to you. And, once you get to a certain threshold, that's going to automatically come. And then they see the podcast, they know you have pull, whatever. And I get that. But the one thing that she told me about was any service, any product, anything that you are searching for, whether it's professional or personal. Let's use a car, for example, just to simplify it. When you're shopping for a car, there's certain things that are a must, like if you have children, you must fit a car seat. Like that is, if the car seat doesn't
Yeah.
fit and you have infant, that's not going to work. So there's like certain things that have to be there, right? Safety may become a factor, obviously, because of the children and yourself and everything else. So it's like car shopping, right? So, but you have to kind of educate yourself as well. You can't just be, I call it the Wikipedia effect, right? Where we're looking at these, non-factual, everybody's just feeding the internet, and then it's like spitting out quote unquote facts, and we're getting very dismantled and very disoriented on what's actually truth and what's actually not, right? What is an opinion and what's an actual fact. And you would think as legal professionals, we'd be more, upfront and more research oriented and not just go with the next best thing or the flashy tool or the newest model or whatever it is. And but my point to this is do your research so that when you are getting pitched at, if it's either BS or if it's something that you actually can utilize and use to the best of its ability. But if you don't know much about it, you might want to do some research before you go ahead and start actually, looking at tools. Okay, what do I actually need versus what is this tool actually providing me? And is that really going to fix 90% of my issues, right? But what are my issues, right? What do those issues look like? And how would that technically be fixed, right? So all these little nuances that we do for our jobs as far as researching laws and statutes and regulations and what the judge likes and what they don't like and how to pick a juror, in this specific thing and how to create an argument or how to draft a 77-page contract. Um, Honestly, we got to take those tools and our skills and transfer them to our research and our investigative as well. So we have to kind of, accountability is definitely a big thing, especially when we're doing these researches and vetting vendors and servicers and all these things. So that is one big tip that I can give you guys is just do the research up front so that you're not getting your leg pulled. So one last thing before we close up the episode, I always like to do a kind of takeaway from the episode. So what is one tip, one resource, one aha moment that you may have had that assisted you in building what you've built today and kind of something that they can take away from the episode?
In some ways, I think that this applies to the tools just as much as it is to the legal profession writ large, is there's no substitution for the work. And what I mean by that is, in some ways, there's this temptation to constantly find, little life hacks and tricks and things like that that will either, make it easier for you at work, notwithstanding use of tools, but also including tools, right? Oh, but for this thing, I'm going to be faster. The blunt reality of it is that there's many things that we do within the legal profession and outside the legal profession that has a very good reason. Tradition exists for a reason. Structure, like certain ways in which people operate in courtrooms, exists for a reason. And some of it is very silly, but I think that in some ways the Silicon Valley mindset, which is laudable in some ways, has encouraged folks to constantly be trying to flout things just because they want to, make things faster, stronger, better, as if somehow that will be better, and it's not. And the reason I say that is because if you're in a paralegal's position, the one thing you should keep in mind is that there may be times in which you're just going to have to dump hours into something that is uncomfortable, stupid, silly, whatever. But that might just be the best way to go about it. The applicable tools available to you, for example, might not be sufficient to replace your learned judgment based on your good experiences. Your gut check is very valuable. So in some ways, the way to think about it is, this is all a very cool topic. It's worth checking these things out. You should be open to it in some ways, but remember that there's just going to be a point of this where at some point you can't avoid the real work, and that's valuable just as much. In some ways, it's good training time. Like in many law firms, the ones that are run well, you need those experiences in order to become better as a paralegal or as an attorney. So in some ways, just spending the time doing it is itself a learning experience, even if it's redundant and could be done faster by, say, a high level partner or an algorithm. So just keep in mind that like sometimes you just got to do the work. And if you find a tool that works for you, that's fantastic. If not, that's okay. Sometimes you have to spend a couple hours doing something that might be a little silly.
No, absolutely. And I completely agree with you on that. And where it's like, no, we're here to work. We're not here to just push buttons because for that, we'll be replaceable, right?
Right.
So at that point, we got to start thinking about, protecting our peace, but also adding to the value that we have with our skills and our experience and our minds. Nobody's going to replace any of that. So thank you so much for taking the time and for being on the podcast. That
Yeah, my
concludes
pleasure.
this episode. Until next time, until justice is served, we'll be here. Bye, guys.
In the legal world, details win cases, and missing one can cost everything. That's why we're proud to be sponsored by a firm, Investigative Solutions. They partner with attorneys and legal teams to uncover the facts that matter most, from background investigations and witness locates to surveillance and asset searches. A firm, Investigative Solutions, is discreet, thorough, and laser-focused on supporting strong case strategy, so you can focus on advocating for your clients. If you need answers, not assumptions, visit affirmpi.com and schedule a free consultation. Affirm Investigative Solutions. Investigate before you litigate.